Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Lila Parker's teenage years were filled with long silences and averted eyes. She used to walk through the school hallways like she was trying to vanish inside her own body, hoping no one would notice her. Her self-esteem had been low for as long as she could remember, but it was during high school that this wound deepened. Her face was covered with inflamed acne, and she wore oversized clothes to hide the body still adjusting to the changes of puberty. Back then, every attempt to stand out only brought more pain. The mirror at home reflected someone she couldn't love, and the way others looked at her only confirmed everything she believed about herself. Instead of friends, she collected cruel nicknames. Instead of happy memories, she gathered humiliations. There was a group of girls who made it their mission to remind her every single day just how different she was. One day, during a classroom presentation, Lila was called to the makeshift stage. As she tried to read a passage from a play, one of her classmates faked a laughing fit, encouraging the others to join in. The whole class turned into a cruel audience. Lila stammered, her voice caught in her throat, and all she wanted was to disappear. The teacher froze, maybe out of embarrassment or indifference, but didn't step in. It was Julian Moore, newly transferred from another school, who finally spoke up. He said, in front of everyone, that the scene was pathetic and cowardly, and that Lila was the only one brave enough to get up on that stage. Silence fell instantly. For the first time, someone had broken the cycle. After that day, Julian started approaching her naturally. He sat beside her during breaks, asked about the little drawings she scribbled in the corners of her notebooks, and complimented her sense of humor, something no one had ever noticed before. He laughed at her inside jokes, paid attention when she spoke, and never made her feel pitted. That's what moved Lila the most. He didn't see her as a broken girl. He saw her as someone interesting. And because of that, she started seeing herself that way too. Lila had never felt comfortable with anyone's touch, but with Julian it was different. When he held her hand or leaned his shoulder against hers, there was no tension. For the first time, she felt there was space for her to just be herself. One day, he brought a box full of sweets his grandmother had made and said he wanted to share them with someone who deserved something good. The words seemed simple, but for Lila, they hit like a thunderclap. For years, she'd believed she deserved nothing. That box of sweets cracked open a sliver of light. Time passed, and their friendship turned into a relationship. At their high school graduation, Julian held her hand proudly in front of everyone. The same people who had laughed at her years before now looked on in surprise, maybe even regret. Lila wore a blue dress she had designed herself. It was far from magazine standards, but she felt beautiful. Not because of the dress, but because she finally knew her worth. Julian had shown her that, but more than that, Lila had started to believe it. In college, they chose different majors, but their bond grew stronger. He studied business and dreamed of opening a real estate agency. She chose graphic design and fell in love with digital illustration. Their nights were filled with talks about the future, travel plans, silly dreams, and promises that they'd never let the world change them. Their wedding was simple, held in Julian's parents' backyard. Close friends, a few relatives, a small cake. But what mattered was a real love, built on mutual respect and rebuilding each other. After their honeymoon, they rented a small apartment in Charleston. Both worked full-time, but they made sure to have dinner together every night. They laughed at everyday mishaps, burnt pans, forgotten utility bills. Every small detail was celebrated as part of building something bigger. Lila felt safe, loved, desired. For the first time in her life, she believed she had overcome all the pain her childhood and teenage years had given her. It was in this atmosphere of stability and fulfillment that they decided to have a child. Caleb was born on a quiet morning, with his father's eyes and his mother's nose. Lila cried when she first held him, not just from the emotion of childbirth, but because she felt she was giving the world someone who wouldn't carry the scars she had. Julian held his son gently, and Lila looked at the two of them with the certainty that she had rebuilt everything that had once been taken from her. For the first time, she believed happiness wasn't something only meant for others. In those first months as a mother, Lila gave her heart completely. She cared for Caleb with a mix of love and fear, wanting to protect him from everything. Julian, despite his demanding job, did everything he could to be present. Their home was simple, but full of meaning. Her drawings hung on the walls, and family photos were scattered in makeshift picture frames. Lila felt grateful for everything she had lived through so far. But time, always relentless, kept moving forward. And with it, some cracks began to appear. Small ones, almost invisible at first. Words swallowed, long silences, doubts she didn't want to face. That love that had rebuilt her, slowly, began to be tested in ways she never imagined. And at that point in her story, Lila didn't yet know that a new chapter was about to begin, one that would force her to confront everything she thought she had already overcome. Lila began to drift away from herself gradually, so subtly that she didn't even notice. By the time Caleb turned 6 months, she no longer recognized herself in the photos Julian took with his phone. The features she once thought of as hers were disappearing under the physical changes of motherhood. Of course, her body had changed. But it was deeper than that. It was as if her identity was dissolving into the routine of feedings, sleepless nights, and the silent demand to always be available. She tried to smile for selfies, but inside, she felt a growing discomfort, like a part of her was being left behind, screaming to be heard. Julian remained kind. He was affectionate with Caleb, made jokes to lighten the exhaustion, and kept complimenting his wife as a way to reinforce their bond. But his words, no matter how sincere, no longer had the same effect. Lila would respond with a forced smile and look away. She started avoiding mirrors. She put on makeup even to go to the supermarket, as if it would protect her from others' judgment. But the harshest judgment came from within. Without meaning to, she compared her current appearance to photos from before her pregnancy, to influencers on social media, to actresses who seemed to give birth and return to their old selves within a month. She created an impossible standard in her mind and began punishing herself for failing to meet it. The comparisons turned into self-criticism. When someone made comments like, "You have such a pretty face, you just need to lose a little weight," she'd pretend to laugh, but the impact was immediate. She started avoiding meetups with old friends. She turned down family lunch invitations, saying Caleb was sick or she had urgent work to finish. The truth was, she was ashamed of her own image. Her favorite clothes didn't fit anymore. Her jeans were too tight. Her bra left marks. And the photos that once filled the house began to disappear from the shelves, one by one. It was during this time that Lila decided to use her inheritance money. Her mother had passed away 3 years before Caleb was born, and her father, 6 months before, while she was still pregnant. With the money she inherited, she could have invested in the family, saved for her son's college, or bought a bigger house. But that didn't feel like enough. Deep down, Lila felt she needed to regain control over her own image. She started with small procedures, teeth whitening, facial peels, lymphatic drainage. Then came the bigger ones. She sought out renowned surgeons and, in less than a year, underwent a series of procedures: rhinoplasty, liposuction, breast implants, fillers. She felt physical pain, but convinced herself it was a fair price to pay to become who she once was again. Julian questioned her a few times. He asked if it was really necessary, if she was okay. But Lila would get upset. She'd say she was doing it for herself, that she wanted to feel good, that he couldn't understand what it was like to carry the marks of pregnancy as a woman in a world that demands perfection. Julian would back off. He never liked conflict. He'd rather wait until she was ready to talk. But that waiting turned into distance. And by the time he realized it, there was already a gap between them. The changes weren't just physical. Her new appearance opened doors to different social circles. Lila started going to cafes where elegant women exchanged secrets about surgeries, gyms, investments, and loveless marriages. Some of these women had children, husbands, jobs. But the way they talked about married life was always laced with sarcasm. One of them, named Brooke, was the most uninhibited. She'd say that staying faithful after 30 was like using a landline, an outdated, unnecessary choice. Lila would laugh at these lines like they were just jokes, but something inside her absorbed them. The sense of empowerment she felt when looking at her new reflection in the mirror mixed with a dangerous restlessness. She began to wonder if the life she was living still made sense. She felt young, beautiful, rediscovered. And when she came home to see Julian in a sauce-stained t-shirt and Caleb playing on the rug, it felt like a scene from someone else's life, not her ideal. Instead of reconnecting with her family, she started avoiding the simplest moments. She preferred spending afternoons with her new friends or locked in her room editing photos to post. Caleb would call for her, and she'd answer from afar. Julian would try to start a conversation, and she'd make up an excuse about being tired. One day, Caleb fell off his bike and came home with a bleeding knee. Julian took care of him, cleaned the wound, applied a bandage, tried to calm him down. Lila only showed up afterward, asked if everything was okay, and went back to her phone. That night, Caleb drew a smiling mom with her back turned to him and handed the paper to Julian. He said it was his mom leaving because she was always going somewhere. Julian kept the drawing without saying a word. Days began to pass like scenes from a confusing script. Lila would wake up with a list of aesthetic procedures to research, clinics to visit, new clothes to try on. Every step toward her new image was another step away from the family she had built. Spontaneous laughter disappeared. Family meals turned into uncomfortable silences. Julian still tried, but it was too late to realize she didn't want to be saved. Lila was fascinated by what she saw as a rebirth, even if it meant leaving behind the woman who had fought so hard to be loved. She told herself it was just a phase, that she still loved Julian, that Caleb would understand someday. But the truth was, she was already starting to consider living a different life, one where motherhood was secondary, marriage just an old chapter, and the mirror finally reflected someone strong, free, and desired. And so, Lila moved forward, believing all of this was freedom, unaware that she was stepping into an even deeper prison, one that wouldn't leave visible scars, but would destroy everything she once swore to protect. Lila met Darius at a charity event hosted by one of her new circle of friends. She only went because Brooke insisted it would be good to break the routine, and because a makeup artist had praised her new jawline just hours earlier. She needed to test the public reaction. The party brought together entrepreneurs, artists, socialites, people she'd never have met in her old life with Julian. She was in a completely different world now, surrounded by people who smiled without meaning it, toasted without knowing each other, and handed out business cards like confetti. Darius Blake appeared almost staged. Tall, with an undefined accent, foreign looks, and charm polished down to the tone of his voice. He approached her naturally, as if he already knew her, complimented her posture, and asked a simple question about the artwork she was looking at. The conversation flowed easily. He said he was a Turkish importer of handmade fabrics, specializing in connecting European fashion designers with luxury ateliers in the US. His talk was seductive, packed with big words and promises of a cosmopolitan world. He spoke of trips to Greece, dinners in Milan, business in Istanbul. Lila listened like she was in a movie. For the first time in years, someone looked at her like she was the main character. And she was ready for the role. In the weeks that followed, they started meeting more often. Darius didn't pressure her, didn't demand anything. He just showed up with mysterious messages, spontaneous invitations, poetic declarations. He said she was the most fascinating woman he'd ever met. He treated her gently, like he was rediscovering love. Lila let herself be swept along. She told herself it was just a different kind of friendship, that she needed space, that she wasn't betraying anyone. After all, Julian barely touched her lately. But deep down, she knew she was crossing a line she wouldn't be able to come back from. Darius started talking about escape. A fresh start, a life far from judgment, commitments, and the routine that suffocated her. He said he had business to wrap up, but planned to settle in Europe and wanted to take her with him. Lila hesitated. She thought of Caleb. She thought of Julian. But Darius knew exactly what to say. He touched all the right spots, exploited old wounds, and offered solutions wrapped in promises of passion and freedom. He said he understood what it meant to live trying to please others, that she deserved a life of pleasure, choice, and intensity. Slowly, she began to imagine the new world she could have with him. To make the plan possible, Darius explained he needed financial help to exit an old business that was holding him back. He said the money would be returned as soon as he sold a property in Portugal. Lila hesitated at first, but eventually made transfers to an overseas account. She called it a loan. She sold a car, withdrew part of a fund left by her father, lied to explain the transactions. She was obsessed with the idea of disappearing. She started planning her farewell like it was a movie. She thought about how Caleb would understand in the future, how Julian would find someone better. She spent hours writing goodbye letters she'd later tear up, rehearsing the moment she'd leave everything behind. Meanwhile, Julian was watching. Quietly, he began to connect the dots, the strange hours, the trips she claimed were meetings, the coldness that had settled between them. He had noticed the marriage was changing, but never imagined his wife was about to vanish with another man. After finding hidden transfer receipts in a computer folder, he hired a private investigator. Within days, he received the first photos, Lila hugging Darius in a quiet restaurant, smiling the way she hadn't smiled with him in a long time. The following week, the discoveries got worse. Darius had a fake identity, used different names in public records, and had a criminal history. He wasn't an importer at all. He was a con artist with a record of romantic scams targeting wealthy women. There was an open arrest warrant for him in 3 states. Julian organized everything. He gathered evidence, printed documents, saved videos. The confrontation was carefully timed. It was the day Lila had planned to disappear. Darius had arranged to pick her up at a downtown hotel where she was supposed to arrive with her bags packed. Julian got there first. He parked the car and waited. Lila entered the suite nervously, holding a small suitcase and an envelope. Before she could call Darius, Julian appeared. She froze. Her face changed color. She tried to hide it, but he showed her the papers. He asked direct questions. Showed her photos. She was in shock. Darius arrived 10 minutes later. Julian introduced himself and showed Darius's police record. Darius tried to run. 2 officers were already at the building's entrance, alerted earlier by Julian. The arrest was quick. Lila stayed silent. She cried without making a sound. She was facing the total collapse of the dream she had built. Caleb was with his grandmother that day. Julian had planned everything so his son wouldn't see his mother exposed like this. When the police took Darius away, Julian handed Lila a flash drive. He simply said it contained the voice messages she had sent to her lover, bank statements, and a copy of the hotel video. He had recorded everything. Lila dropped to her knees. She tried to reach for Julian. He stepped back. He told her she could leave on her own or wait to be prosecuted for misusing funds from their joint account. She begged him to listen, said none of it was done out of malice. Julian only replied that from that day forward, he would do everything possible to protect Caleb from the memory of it all. And then he left. Alone in that hotel suite, surrounded by suitcases that now seemed meaningless, Lila stared into the mirror and didn't recognize her own reflection. For the first time, she understood that her search for freedom had actually been a run from everything real. She realized the cost of reinventing herself at any price was too high. And worse, she hadn't just lost her husband. She had lost her son's respect, her right to her own story, and herself. The scandal involving Lila spread faster than she imagined. Some friends cut ties immediately, as if her name had become a social liability. Others stayed close out of curiosity or to confirm the rumors. Brooke, once her closest friend, didn't even reply to her messages. Darius made local news when he was arrested, and even though Lila's name wasn't mentioned in the report, the images of police leading him out in handcuffs said more than 1,000 words. Lila lost her freelance job at an advertising agency as soon as the scandal reached the partners. Some clients started canceling projects, and she realized she was alone. Julian didn't take the case to court. He said what she had done was punishment enough. He filed for divorce, requested full custody of Caleb, and moved with his son to a new house. In a short time, Lila was living with the bare minimum. She sold whatever was left of value and threw herself into therapy sessions that started almost out of obligation but quickly became the only thing holding her together. When she looked in the mirror, the features of the woman she once wanted to disappear had returned, but now with deeper marks, those of regret. She moved to a smaller town where no one knew her. She signed her work as L. Parker and avoided putting herself out there. She was hired to teach illustration at a small community school and rented a modest studio with what little she had left. At night, she wrote letters to Caleb. One every month. She wrote about her days, her mistakes, her memories of him as a baby, the drawings he used to make that she had kept like treasures. The letters were sent, but never returned. No reply, no sign they'd even been read. It was in this same town that she met Martha, an elderly woman who lived upstairs and suffered frequent memory lapses. Lila started by helping with groceries, then with organizing the house, and soon became responsible for taking care of her. Martha confused Lila with her daughter, who had moved to another state and rarely called. She called Lila my girl and said she had good hands, a clean heart, a suffering soul. Despite the constant confusion, their relationship became a point of healing. For the first time since her life collapsed, Lila felt useful, accepted without judgment. She understood that Martha was projecting someone else onto her, but that mattered less than the truth she found there, that there was still a part of her capable of loving and being loved. One day, while cleaning an old closet, Martha handed Lila a wooden box full of unsent letters to her distant daughter. Lila began reading each one aloud to her. And as she read, she felt like she was reading them to herself. Every word about forgiveness, abandonment, longing, and hope seemed to echo her own soul. Over time, Lila started writing letters to herself too. Not to Caleb, but to the woman she had been, the one she lost, and the one she wanted to become. Writing became an act of recovery. It was like rebuilding a map from the inside out. 5 years passed. Martha passed away peacefully in Lila's arms, after mistaking her name for her daughter's one last time and asking her never to stop smiling. Lila was the only one at the funeral, and afterward, she knew it was time to go back. Not with the hope of rekindling a marriage, not with the illusion of erasing the past. But with the need to look Julian and Caleb in the eyes and acknowledge everything she had destroyed. She traveled to Charleston without warning. She went to the new house where Julian lived with his son. She waited at the door. Her heart pounded, but her mind was calm. She knew this was her last chance to do something worthy. Julian answered. His face was older now, his gaze steady, his expression neutral. Caleb, now 12, appeared behind his father and recognized her instantly. He stopped, unmoving. Lila cried in front of both of them. She asked for forgiveness. Said she wanted nothing more than to rebuild some kind of connection. She told them about the years she spent trying to find herself again, about life with Martha, about the letters, about her mistakes. She said she understood if it was too late, but she needed to try. She only asked to be heard, even if just for a few minutes. Julian let her speak. He listened to everything. He didn't interrupt. In the end, he took a deep breath and replied in a calm but firm tone. He said he respected her effort, saw honesty in her eyes, but something inside him had broken. And the greatest love he could give Caleb now was to keep him away from what once hurt him. He added that Caleb had the right to decide in the future, but as a father, he preferred to protect him. He handed her a cardboard box with tape on the corners. Inside were all the letters she had sent, organized in the order they arrived, some with Caleb's small doodles, others untouched. Alongside them, an envelope with his son's most recent drawing. Lila left holding the box. She got in her car and cried like she hadn't cried in years. She opened the envelope with trembling hands. The drawing showed a closed door and, on the other side, a woman sitting on the floor, head down. Above the image was a sentence written in crooked but firm letters, "Mom, you left before. Now it's too late to come back." Those words cut through everything. There was nothing more to say, to ask, to hope for. It was over. She held the drawing against her chest and took a deep breath. She didn't feel anger or despair anymore. What remained was acceptance. She knew that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. She knew that when forgiveness is denied, that's also an answer. And still, she moved forward. Because in that moment, Lila finally understood that redemption doesn't always come from others. Sometimes, it comes from the courage to face your own fall without running. And even though it was painful, that was already the beginning of something new. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.